Good morning. It is Wednesday, October 1st, 2014. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, nearly 2 months on since the U.S. began airstrikes against Islamic State positions in northern Iraq, there are signs that the militants are adapting to the new reality. Pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong set a deadline for a response from the government in Beijing to meet their demands for reforms. And later on the show, today is the first day of the Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we'll take a closer look at the healing power of art. Good morning, I'm Yael Avi, and we begin with our main topic of the day, a reflective one. Against the familiar green backdrop of the UN headquarters in New York, U.S. President Obama made the case for war against ISIS, or Daesh, or ISIL, in a tone very reminiscent of former President Bush's axis of evil speech more than 10 years ago. The battleground is no longer Afghanistan, and the enemy is no longer Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. The conflict has moved towards northern Iraq and Syria, and the new adversary is the self-styled Islamic State and its rampaging caliphate. But the argument for war and the wording are practically identical. There seems to be no argument amongst nearly all the world leaders converging at the UN this week about the fact that ISIS is bad. Very, very bad. But what do we really know? And can the battle against this new foe end up 10 years from now being a grave mistake? Again, that seems to be the case for the last battle fought in Iraq. And in order to examine this, we are joined by very good people. So let me introduce him. Joined in studio, senior researcher at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at the IDC Herzliya, Dr. Amichai Magen. Good morning to you. And of course, by the president of the Levantine Group Consultancy and security analyst, Daniel Nisman. Good morning to you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before we break this down, let's take a look at the latest report about the battle and the fight against ISIS.
While the rise of the terrorist group known as Daesh, or the Islamic State, has been the focus of the international community over recent weeks, on the ground in Iraq, forces fighting the jihadists have been seeing some progress over the past few days. Early Tuesday, Kurdish Peshmerga forces launched offensives on towns controlled by Daesh in northern Iraq. Fighting took place in and around the towns of Rabia and Zumar, which are of strategic importance because of their proximity to the Mosul Dam, while villages near Dakuk were also retaken according to Kurdish sources.
The Islamic State group is propaganda. They are not strong in reality. Peshmergas are always ready on these mountains and the fronts to make sure that the jihadists don't win.
The Kurdish forces are being supported by U.S.-led airstrikes. These have forced Daesh to change their tactics, abandoning mass convoys in favor of more discreet forms of travel and guerrilla warfare. Progress has also been made closer to the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, where the army stated it had liberated 16 villages in Diyala province from the hands of the Islamic State.
Iraqi troops have launched an operation to liberate captured areas in the Diyala province. We have liberated almost all the areas, and the rest will be liberated soon, and the joy of Eid al-Adha will be doubled.
In Syria, recent developments have been less positive, with Daesh forces advancing to within 5 kilometers of the key town of Kobani, near the Turkish border, and firing rockets into the town center. A senior U.S. officer noted the airstrikes in Iraq were being coordinated with Iraqi and Kurdish forces, a situation that does not yet exist in Syria, where the West does not have the same kind of ties with forces on the ground. Airstrikes against Daesh's main strongholds are therefore dependent mainly on aerial surveillance, a reminder that this threat is still far from being eliminated.
And we're first joined on the phone from Erbil in Iraq by Paula Sleer, Middle East Bureau Chief for Russia Today. Paula, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being on. There are reports, actually, I'm reading and hearing conflicting reports. Some saying that, the coalition forces and the Peshmerga on the ground are making advances and pushing ISIS back. That said, in other places you're reading, we're hearing that that's not the case. What are you seeing on the ground?
Well, we're receiving exactly the same conflicting reports. I'm actually based in the city of Erbil, the Kurdish stronghold in northern Iraq, and yesterday we went to the front line where the Peshmerga fighters, who are essentially your Kurdish fighters, are tackling ISIS. The front line, from what I can judge, is constantly moving. You have, just to give you a sense of what it is like there, you have your Peshmerga fighters who have set up along a 1,000-kilometer border. So you can actually drive for quite some time before you see them in a tent encampment, and then you can continue for quite some time before you see them again.
Right.
But what was particularly bizarre was that you stand at the fighters, and if you use binoculars, you can see in the distance villages that actually have been taken over by ISIS. Now, when I asked them the question, who determines in which direction the front line moves, they were saying that they're on the offensive. They say that the airstrikes have been extremely helpful. They say that they've noticed a lack of movement from the ISIS side, that they're very afraid, for example, to get into vehicles and move around or use telephones or any kind of communication that would help pinpoint where these Western-led airstrikes should target. They also said that they are struggling from ancient weaponry, but they are receiving assistance from the international community that they feel is both critical and is helping them. So certainly on the ground here in northern Iraq, one gets the sense that the front line is fluid, and as I say, and this certainly is coming from the Peshmerga fighters,
right,
that it is relatively stable, but that they're managing to push ISIS back.
They push it back. That said, we are hearing reports this morning also that ISIS seems to be adapting to the Western airstrike, that they seem to be, sort of either, pre-reading them or adapting them, or as it goes on the ground. Paula, do stay with us, because you're actually at the crust of what seems to be the most interesting thing and the only thing dominating the agenda of the UN General Assembly in New York these days. And as we said at the beginning of this segment, the big foe, ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, everybody seems to be talking about it in New York. That's the only thing that the Western world is dealing with. Let's hear a little bit of what, the last week at the UN had to give us about ISIS.
No God condones this terror. No grievance justifies these actions. There can be no reasoning, no negotiation with this brand of evil. The only language understood by killers like this is the language of force.
We are facing an evil against which the whole of the world should unite. And as ever, in the cause of freedom, democracy and justice, Britain will play its part.
Militant Islam's ambition to dominate the world seems mad. But so too did the global ambitions of another fanatic ideology that swept into power 8 decades ago. The Nazis believed in a master race. The militant Islamists believe in a master faith.
Dr. Amichai Magen of the IDC Counterterrorism Institute in Herzliya. Here's my question to you. I was a journalist in Iraq, and Paula Slier is still with us on the phone because she was there too. In Iraq in 2003, it wasn't fun to be a journalist after the war, and I'll tell you why. Because very quickly on the ground we realized there were no weapons of mass destruction. That Saddam Hussein, as was to us on stages and with that green backdrop, was a very bad foe, but he had no intention of actually taking over the entire Western world. Isn't there a fear that this new campaign waged in Iraq right now will have the same outcome of making not just journalists but the entire Western world then question themselves again, because who is this ISIS foe? What do we really know about them, and are they really as dangerous? Why is this danger so imminent?
Well, I think that when we're trying to assess a threat of a terrorist organization, any terrorist organization, we want to look at two key variables. We want to look at their motivation, their ideology, their goals, and we want to look at their capacities, okay? I think that when it comes to ISIS, and part of the reason why ISIS has made it so easy for the international community to galvanize around the idea that it needs to be degraded and destroyed is because ISIS's motivation is boundless. This is a radical Salafist organization that is motivated by 7th century Islamist theology of the most fundamentalist radical type. And they are pursuing a political and religious agenda. So on the side of motivation, Prime Minister Netanyahu has made a comparison, try to make a comparison between Hamas on the one hand and ISIS on the other. There are different levels of motivation,
shot down by the State Department.
Because the motivations of Hamas, at least in the short run, are very different from the ones of ISIS. But we also need to look at the capacity, and I think here this is something that that you allude to. This cascade of state failure that we see across large sections of North Africa and the Middle East are bringing into the hands of terrorist organizations, which in the past had the radical motivation and ideology, but are now acquiring new capacities. They're acquiring territory, money, oil fields, possibly access to water resources, to dams. They're also controlling more and more people. And the longer these organizations control territory and populations, the greater their capacities to wage havoc, both locally but also regionally and internationally, will become. And so we need to take this challenge seriously. It doesn't mean that we need to adopt the same tactics and strategies as we tried in Afghanistan or in Iraq, but we cannot ignore this threat.
A valid point. That said, when we're looking at that threat, and this is to you, Daniel Nisman, of the Levantine group, what makes it different than, I'm sorry to say, the other crazy groups of the Middle East? I mean, this is not something new, and dare I say, even beheadings are not new. It's something that has been happening over the course of the last several decades. Why is the Western world so afraid of this new foe that it needs to mobilize all its smart bombs and smart guns and whatnot and intelligence and wage just what seems to be almost a World War III against them?
Well, I think it's important to mention that this organization has been growing. It's been very active for the past 1, 2, 3 years. And it was ignored up until Americans and British nationals started being beheaded in a very public way.
Right.
And it sort of jumped out at everybody. Even Obama admitted that U.S. intelligence underestimated the threat. But you're right. We've seen similar situations where you've had Islamic-controlled entities where there have been governmental vacuums.
Right.
Take, for example, in northern Mali, where they controlled for, I believe, between 6 to 12 months because the Malian government simply couldn't control the north of their country. And then you had a French-led operation, and it was largely successful. It's still fairly unstable, but there is no more Islamic emirate in northern Mali. The issue now is that this organization is almost entirely autonomous. It can survive off its own funds. It doesn't rely externally. It's controlling over 8 million people. It has access to a good amount of weapons. And the big fear is that it could expand its influence outward through dual nationals, through funds. And you already see different groups starting to pop up, especially in North Africa. So this is the big fear that, people have been asking if it's too little, too late. I would say that there is no such thing as too little, too late with a group like ISIS. It's good that they're trying to curb it right now. But the question is, what's the end game? What's the strategy?
Right.
And I would argue that in terms of the conditions that allowed ISIS to thrive in eastern Syria and northern Iraq, those conditions are not being dealt with by the strategy, and that needs to shift if ISIS is to ever truly be vanished.
I think this is an extremely important point, if I may. The nature of the threat is determined not only by the motivation and the capacity of the particular terrorist organization, but also the geopolitical conditions in which these organizations exist. If you have an organization like ISIS trying to rear its head within a strong state, let's say Turkey, or Iran, or even Pakistan, you have counterforces that are able to contain it, that are able to degrade it.
Which you do not have in Iraq right now.
You don't have that in Iraq, you don't have that in Syria, and you have this vacuum, not only in terms of governance in these areas, but also in terms of the countervailing, the counteracting forces. We're trying to rely on the Kurds. We're trying to rely on the Iraqi army, which really has been a very effective conduit in transferring weapons from the United States to the jihadists. And you have great reluctance on the part of the West to get once more bogged down in a long-term, expensive state-building exercise. So you have the perfect vacuum in which these groups thrive. So we've seen this issue of adaptation. We've seen this issue of changing tactics. That is all occurring on the tactical level. Unless we have a strategy in place to win the tactical battle, but then hold the territory, de-radicalize the population, and build effective governance, when we're not going to be able to defeat this type of phenomena, whether it's called Daesh or ISIL or ISIS, and it will mutate another 1,000 times.
Which leads me to the next question, and Paul Asli is still with us from Erbil in northern Iraq, and I'm glad you're on this, because what we're describing right now, Dr. Margan, is the fact that whatever the coalition and the forces are doing right now is actually not going to work. Because if it's only from the air, and my question to you, Paula, is, You know, if you're looking at these airstrikes and the advances and the conflicting reports, this all leads one to believe that we're looking at the same scenario that you covered yourself in 2003, that there will need to be more help on the ground. Isn't that the case?
Well, it certainly is the case, and one of the questions that people are asking is whether or not these airstrikes will be effective or whether ultimately they'll lead to boots on the ground. And it's a question that I'm posing to people here. In fact, I did ask the Peshmerga leaders that I met with yesterday what they felt. And their response, and of course they were very nervous to actually commit themselves to saying as much. So what they were prepared to say is that they were not surprised by the rise of ISIS, that they were warning against this, as one of your analysts said already, for the past 3 years. One of the accusations that people here level is that indirectly the Western community has actually been involved in helping to create them. For example, in assisting the opposition fighters that were in Syria. So that is something that the West needs to actually be aware of and counter, if you like. The other point I wanted to make is that at the moment, the focus is, of course, on arming and training both the Iraqi forces and the Peshmerga. But we have reports here of, for example, of Iraqi fighters who, when coming face-to-face with ISIS, are defecting from the army and running away. So that there's been a call that's gone out to encourage them to come back and say that there will be no kind of repercussions. Certainly you have your Kurdish fighters like the Peshmerga who admit that they really need Western support. And if it is believed that in the areas where I am, the Peshmerga is on the offensive, certainly that has to be in a large way because of the airstrikes that they very much have come to rely on. Another point that also needs to be raised is just the cost that this has on the Western community. The estimates are that the first wave of military attacks against ISIS cost nearly $1 billion, and that we could be looking at something like $1.8 billion a month. So that is something, again, that the Western public and Western governments will need to ask themselves whether it is, in fact, money well spent. And just as a last point, just to give you a sense of what's like on the ground, just in the city of Erbil, the life carries on pretty much the same here. I mean, I'm 45 kilometers from the front line, but everybody is armed. It's something that I have been doing a report on. You can no longer buy weapons on the market, and this is because they're trying to stop the flow of weapons that actually make it into civilian hands. But certainly the sense you get here is, yes, ISIS is off to one side and the city of Erbil is protected, but no one's taking their chances. So you have, for example, luxury goods, let's say cars and homes, right, and assets that can't be moved, that people are not buying. People are stocking up on things like food, and although life carries on like normal, there is at the back of everyone's mind the question of whether or not the Peshmerga and the international community will be able to starve off ISIS. But just people are not hedging their bets just in case they can't. There is this undercurrent of preparedness that they might be made into refugees themselves.
Paula, do stay with us, though. Daniel Nisman, you were shaking your hand, I think, about the about who is to blame for the rise of ISIS, which, you know, as I know that international leaders, that's the other thing, the other part of what's going on in the UN, of, you know, we have the Russians standing on the stage going, we told you so. But, you know, whoever is to blame, my question is, you know, moving forward, can this be done, as I posed to Paul, without boots on the ground? And if boots on the ground, I'm asking this every time we sit here together, is aren't they going to create another foe down the line? Because foreign fighters in a country or in a region that currently is basically battling to, you know, recreate itself, to reinvent itself, is going to cause new animosities.
Boots on the ground you absolutely need to have. But there's a misconception about which boots, okay?
Okay.
You can't have Western troops with boots on the ground in these areas. You can't have Shiite militia fighters. You cannot have Alawite-led Assad regime fighters. The only boots on the ground to eradicate ISIS are moderate Sunni soldiers that come from their own communities, okay? I'll give you an example.
Right.
Between 2006 to really up until the American evacuation from Iraq, there was a movement called the Sahwa, the Awakening, where the U.S. obviously recognized that there was a massive problem of al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they didn't call in the Iranians, and they definitely didn't call in the Assad regime, because the Assad regime was actually funneling the fighters in. They went to the Sunni tribes in western and northern Iraq, and they went to them and they said, you will be leading this fight with the support of the United States, and that was the only time that this counterterrorism, a real counterinsurgency operation, worked. And now, we don't see any traces of that, nor with the moderate rebels in Syria, which could be the future Syrian Sahwa, right, and you don't see that with the moderate Sunnis who are allied with ISIS in western and northern Iraq. Now, I want to make an important point. The Lightning Campaign in June, where ISIS stormed Mosul and they got within reach of Baghdad, they had 60,000 fighters, okay? Within that, only about 10 or 15,000 of them were actually ISIS members, okay? The other tens of thousands were made up of Sunni tribes from the area, the old Ba'athist elements, which are called the Naqshbandi Order, which are actually anti-ISIS, and other jihadists known as Jaish al-Islam and all these other groups that are even, that they themselves are actually opposed to ISIS. So why would these groups want to ally themselves with ISIS? Why? Because they felt so marginalized by the sectarian policies of the Iranian-backed Maliki regime, and they sympathized with the moderate Sunnis suffering under the Alawite-dominated Assad regime. They were marginalized, and they basically said, so to speak, they said to these governments, they said, look, you can either have us or you can have ISIS. And what did those governments choose to do? They obviously didn't, they continued to marginalize them, and that's what happened.
But you know, what you're describing right now, and Dr. Morgan, I'm actually asking you this, is that this is actually a group that is made up of many, many small groups that, you know, if I were a world leader, it sounds fairly easy to actually break it apart. I don't think one needs so many weapons because, and I mean, you're the expert, Nisman, on, you know, on the Sunnis groups and the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to try and pronounce everything. And, you know, and again, I'm going back to the entire Western world mobilizing itself, and this is the big threat, and we have to fight it there before it gets to us, which is also an argument that is slightly problematic. Aren't we seeing here then maybe forces that are slightly larger, that there's some, and I'm theorizing that if at the UN, all the world leaders are sitting and discussing this, that this is an attempt to actually pick sides in the Middle East and reshape it in a way that is appeasing to everybody. Because this is actually, it is the UN, or a case in point, the United States, picking a side, isn't it?
Well, sure. I mean, of course the United States is picking a side and is seeking to destroy.
No, but changing the map. I mean, if I'm looking at, and let me ask you this, if we're looking at David Cameron of the UK sitting with Rouhani, okay, for the first time in 35 years, several days ago, okay, and let's say that Cameron maybe is, 2 degrees away from the United States president, and there's this new coalition that is formed that is completely, there's something very, very new for the Western world and the Middle East.
Sure. We live at a moment of great systemic fluidity, unprecedented, I think, in the last century. And during this kind of time of fluidity, it is only natural that all the actors involved, both regional, local, the Iranians, the Saudis, the Israelis, the Egyptians, but also international actors are trying to figure out what is the constellation, what is the arrangement that's going to stabilize the situation. I think that what we see here, rather, sure, there is a reshaping. My sense is that the reshaping that is taking place is revolving around an axis of those actors that want to see the maintenance of, if you like, the old system, the state-built system,
exactly.
Led by the United States. We can call it the liberal international order. The UN is a classic manifestation of that. And those anti-systemic actors, including Iran, including ISIS, that really want to undermine the old order, that view the world in radically different terms than the way you and I view the world as being composed of these sovereign states. And that is exactly the governance contestation that is happening in the region. Now, we also have to remember that unlike 1991, the first Gulf War, the ability of the United States to bring people to its side without getting people to make pretty outlandish demands is much weaker. If you looked at the Bush the father was able to put together a coalition of 28 states without hearing the kind of demands that we now hear from the Iranians or from the Saudis.
And that were problems like you're going to hear after this campaign ends.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have a situation of great fluidity, and you have a situation where the traditional hegemon, the United States, has a reduced capacity to really build a coherent coalition. That's why you see all this background noise and all this confusion.
Oh, the background noise and confusion, though, I think, Daniel Nisman, you were the one who actually said to me several days ago that this is actually a time of great change in the Middle East. That this is moving in ways that, we are not expecting, which is what it seems to, to somebody looking at these coalitions and forces forming on the ground.
It's a great change because you really do see the formation of three alliances. Okay, it's what I've said repeatedly. There's the moderate Sunnis, which are Egypt, Saudi, the Gulf monarchies, Jordan. There's the Sunni Islamist axis, which is Qatar, Turkey, Tunisia, the Muslim Brotherhood movement, and as extensions of that, the jihadi movement. And then the third axis is the Iranian axis. Now, if you look at the actors that are contributing to instability, they are the Iranian axis, which everywhere that you see an Iranian proxy, whether it be Yemen, Lebanon, Gaza, Iraq, Syria, Bahrain, there is instability. Everywhere that you see a Sunni Islamist actor, especially a militant one, you have instability, okay? All three of these are fighting each other. Now, when you have the United States in the middle of this triangle, deciding which front it wants to go to, okay? You see them edging closer to the Iranians with the nuclear talks, offering,
the Iranians are in the game.
A package deal. Yeah. You see them negotiate, you see them maintaining very warm ties with the Sunni Islamist axis, Turkey and Qatar. And now all of a sudden you see them creeping back towards their home, the moderate Sunni axis with this new coalition. If the United States does not quickly return back to the axis of moderate Sunnis, then this kind of instability is only going to continue. And you can just look at the results of the past 3 years, where you have Islamist Sunnis and Islamist in the Iranian axis fighting, and that has been the main contributor to instability.
It brings us back to the need that we discussed some time ago of a two-layer coalition. There needs to be a military tactical coalition to contain and degrade these terrorist organizations that do pose a huge threat. But at the same time, there needs to be a strategic coalition to stabilize the region, to try to create new anchors of stability and to prevent spillover from already existing areas of chaos into the last remaining islands of stability in the Middle East, most notably Jordan.
There's one last point I'd like to add.
One last point quickly.
There's increasing animosity in the moderate Sunni world about the U.S. not being tough enough with the Assad regime. They're basically seeing these airstrikes from the Assad regime and the United States are being reported together in tandem. If the United States doesn't show that it is equally opposed to the regime that gassed 1,500 people in a single day last year, they're going to quickly lose support in the moderate Sunni world.
And that's the million-dollar question, and time will tell, because I think in Syria, if this continues from the air, they will not be able, the United States or the coalition, to continue the airstrikes without support from the ground, and support from the ground is the Assad regime, sadly. Thank you both for joining me this morning. When we get back, Hong Kong protesters issue an ultimatum to Beijing to accept their demands. We'll take a closer look. First, though, let's hear some more of this morning headlines. Hello and good morning. Thank you for joining us. I-24 News Morning Edition, the place you should be. October 1st, the signs of fall, the marches of whatever, but still, it is the signs of fall.
Yes, it is. Autumn in the air.
Autumn in the air. And autumn in the air, love in the studio. This is where I love to say hello and good morning to Tony Grand, who joins me daily to tell us about the news you missed while scanning the headlines.
Yeah, well, very good autumn morning to you.
Amen.
And to all. Starting with a story that's in the Israeli newspapers. Got Yediot Aronot here, big Israeli daily, which I'm going to hold it up here.
Yes.
This is kind of starting to become a big story. This is about an Israeli construction worker, Netanel Arami, who was apparently involved in a construction accident which resulted in his death, I think, last month.
Right.
And allegedly, now the police are saying it was an intentional sabotage. A nationally
he fell off the roof of the building. Was supposedly a national?
There are these cables that were attached to himself in this construction project, and apparently police are saying Palestinian construction workers may have sabotaged him during the course of his work.
It's gaining a lot of traction in the Israeli press, covering it and be coming out,
Yeah, so that's something that if true, of course, would be very, very, disturbing to say the least, but I think the police are pursuing that aggressively as we speak.
Right.
Also on a similar, not too happy note, the Jerusalem Post has this headline. A Fatah official, a low-ranking one, but still, said that Palestinians who sold homes to Jews in East Jerusalem should die. So, this is regarding, there were basically some Jewish settlers moved into 7 homes in a largely Palestinian neighborhood called Silwan on Tuesday.
Silwan is incredibly problematic all through the years. Yep.
Yes, and even more so.
Known to Silwan or City of David, as some settlers would like to call it.
Exactly.
Yes.
And the real estate transactions took place legally. So that's not the issue, but the issue is, should they be there in the first place, and the intermediaries involved coming under some heat for their involvement. And let's just say there's 90 Jewish families that live there among 50,000 Palestinians protected by Israeli police.
Okay.
So it's not the most maybe neighborhood-friendly kind of place in terms of the numbers. I mean, there's tension, to say the least.
There's tension. I mean, I got to say, I've covered Silwan many years, and it's a problematic area because it's one of those places in East Jerusalem, on the border there, East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, City of David, what it meant, et cetera, et cetera. The transactions of the house sellings are always debated in the Israeli high courts, but it's one of these places that if ever anything is signed here, ever, they should probably internationalize Silwan. That would be, the only thing to solve it. And maybe Jerusalem. I never said that.
It seems international in a way now, de facto, but not in the best way. But I hear what you're saying. Also, in terms of tension, here's a little bit of tension brewing up in Beirut. The Daily Star of Beirut says that Iran is to donate military equipment to the Lebanese army. Now
they're all over, aren't
they? They just have to poke their noses into everything. Now, of course, they are largely said to have backed, almost completely Hezbollah, which of course is a militia group, if you will, or terrorist group, according to some.
But also in the Lebanese parliament.
Exactly. Yes. And apparently they're saying this donation to the Lebanese army is kind of like a one-off kind of thing. But the Saudis have donated, the United States has given donations, so I guess they just want to be in on the Donate to the Lebanese Army Act.
How sweet of them.
How sweet of them.
Yes. What else?
Speaking of sweet like crude oil. The Financial Times reports that the United States is poised to become the world's leading liquid petroleum producer. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently. Should I
clap? With one hand, because it's probably still bad for the environment. But actually, American production of liquid petroleum will exceed Saudi Arabia's in September when they tabulated up for the first time since 1991. Yeah.
That actually raises a lot of questions to how much does the United States now need Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, well, Saudi Arabia says that America is still needs them.
I bet they do.
And that the world does, and that they're unfazed by this. Yes. No, it's they've got plenty of stocks. They say they've got the prowess.
What you want, but fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well.
Yeah. We're still number one.
But we're talking neck and neck here in terms of last June and August. 11.5 million barrels a day that the U.S. was producing.
That's actually a fascinating story because of everything that's going on in the Middle East right now, and who needs who.
Ramifications down the road.
Yep.
Of course, all eyes on Hong Kong, but just an interesting little headline there from yesterday late that David Cameron, British Prime Minister, says China should hold to the Hong Kong voting accord from 1997 when they turned over the reins.
Right.
So again, and the UK summoned China's ambassador to express British support for the pro-democracy demonstrators. So a little bit of escalation in that scenario.
They did, I think the Cameron or the British do feel slightly beholden being, the last people to control Hong Kong. But yes, it's like, and we'll take a closer look at that in the next segment. Yes.
Wall Street Journal, I'm not sure if we talked about this before, but Catalonia has suspended their independence referendum campaign.
Really?
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well, what happened there is basically a decision by Spain's constitutional court has blocked the progress of this planned referendum vote on legal grounds. Apparently it's illegal, and the Catalonian government doesn't want to subject relevant lawmakers to potential legal action, so they plan to appeal the decision, but for the moment, they're not going to be going Scotland on this situation.
I'm going to go Scottish on you. Yeah, too bad. I was looking for that, independent Catalonia. Yes.
It'll be back in the news, I'm sure, once it goes through the courts and all that. And Kim Jong-un, the illustrious leader of North Korea.
Haven't had him for a while.
Yeah, well, he likes Swiss cheese and lots of it and Cuban heels. And apparently this is what led to him breaking his ankle.
Cuban heels?
Oh, yeah, there's those kinds of shoes that they come from Cuba and they make you look really tall.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
There's a name for that. I'm not going to say it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Cuban heels. Oh, well, the other one.
Right. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So anyway, apparently he was wearing those Cuban heels after having eaten lots of Swiss cheese. And that's what caused him to fracture his ankles while touring a military base.
Oh, come on.
He's recovering in the Bonn Clinic.
Where was this published?
The Express. It's a leading British newspaper.
It is a leading British newspaper.
Yeah. Apparently he's gained 20 stone, which I think is something like 280
and 80 something like
something.
Yeah, something
he's a good eater.
He's a big fella.
And standing on tall shoes and
okay. I mean, love the headline.
Speedy recovery.
Yes, please, and send me those shoes. Tony, thank you. Apparently that is all the time we have. But when you're going to stay with us for the next hour.
See you soon.
Thank you. On to our next topic, dominating the news these days. After 3 days of mass pro-democracy protest, Occupy Central leaders announced a deadline for the Hong Kong government to respond to their demand for voting reform. Namely, that deadline expires today, or they will escalate their demonstrations. We are joined in studio by social activist and citizen of Hong Kong who lives in Israel, Wai Lam Chan. Did I pronounce your name right?
Wai Lam Chan.
Wai Lam Chan, good for me. Okay, hello, good morning to you. And let's take a look at the following report first to see what has been happening in the last 24 hours in Hong Kong.
Fresh waves of pro-democracy protesters are continuing to pour into Hong Kong in one of the largest demonstrations in the city so far. Tens of thousands of demonstrators blocked the streets of the financial district around the government headquarters on Tuesday as the police presence was unexpectedly small. The city's chief executive addressed the media in the hope of putting an end to the protests.
Occupy Central founders had said that if the movement gets out of hand, they would call for it to stop. I'm now asking them to fulfill the promise they made to society and stop this campaign immediately.
Following on from the statement, China's foreign ministry also condemned the movement.
The Chinese central government firmly opposes the various illegal activities in Hong Kong that have jeopardized rule of law and social stability and peace.
Chinese officials may be right to worry. Protesters are furious at Beijing's announcement of tight restrictions on candidates for the next chief executive of Hong Kong to be elected in 2017. The city is part of the One Country, Two Systems framework, which allows it considerable autonomy from China. But a University of Hong Kong study showed that public confidence in this framework plummeted from over 74% in 2007 to just below 38% in July 2014. Meanwhile, the protest movement's momentum is continuing to rise ahead of the national holiday on Wednesday. Protesters were seen carrying umbrellas to ward off tear gas and pepper spray attacks, causing some to dub the movement the Umbrella Revolution.
Joining us from Hong Kong now is journalist Bridget Hall. Bridget, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I hear you're on the streets. What is happening right now, and what is expected today as this deadline was basically given down by the demonstrators?
Well, today on the streets, it's very quiet. I was in Admiralty this morning. I then walked past Causeway Bay, and there are a couple of people lying around, a lot of people sleeping. I suspect a lot of people went home to get some rest and some food and a change of clothes as it rained through the evening. But I think things should pick up later towards the evening.
We're looking at live pictures. It looks like massive amounts of people, but very, very peaceful, right?
Yes, very, very, very peaceful. A lot of people still milling around and shopping. I'm at Victoria Park now, where a National Day celebration was planned, and at the moment it's pretty much empty. It's absolutely empty. This morning they did the flag rising without a hitch. Both flags can be seen flying in the air. So today has been a very, very quiet day. I suspect things should pick up towards the evening.
All right, which we'll be following, as we said, daily. And thank you for joining us. Wai Lam Chen with us in the studio. Good morning to you. You've been here, I understand, for 10 years, but you're Hong Kong, at heart, I'm assuming, and a social activist. When the demonstrators there say that they're going to escalate, the demonstrations, and today's the deadline, what does that mean? Because it seems to be the most peaceful attempt at changing power that I've ever seen.
Well, what I have heard from the internet and from my friend that the protests are very self-constrained, that they emphasize it has to be a peace protest because they do not want any excuses for the police or even the Chinese army to take over the protests.
Right, and you're very active with this cause on social networks, aren't you? How much of it in Hong Kong is actually, how many people are actually, gathering, sending messages through the social networks, and what is the main goal at the end? How long do you think people are willing to stay in the streets of Hong Kong?
I guess among the young people, they are very, very active in the social media, mainly in Facebook, Twitter less, and I've heard they have blocked Instagram. It's really hard to say. Today is the National Day of China.
Right.
So it's a holiday, and tomorrow is also a holiday. But this protest basically is not led by any political party. It's led by students. And
as we saw the case with Occupy Wall Street, as was the case.
Yeah, so
sometimes there's a problem when you don't have a leader.
A very strong leader. There isn't a very clear leadership. That's what I personally worried about because everybody has to work. They have to go to school.
Right.
So, and I personally hope it can last because every year in Hong Kong there are many protests. There are protests that has over 50,000 people.
Right.
But nothing has been achieved. So they go to protest, they go home.
Is there talk amongst the activists, among the people, on the ground there, to think that, maybe something more needs to be done? I'm not saying violence, but, to upgrade the level of protests. We don't want to see more tear gas, but, the peaceful demonstration is lovely. There's, as you mentioned, without a political leader or a political, road, what else can be done to force the Chinese to actually reform the voting system?
That's a good question. I'm asking myself the same question. Yeah.
Is it a talk? Is that raised between the activists, between people in the street there?
Like everywhere, I think the pro-democratic fraction of a society usually they have so many different ideology and ideas, so it's hard to concentrate them and raise a leader. So that's another problem.
That's another problem. I think that one of the main things that we've noticed about social revolutions, and that was the case actually in Israel, that there were so many, as you said, so many ideas converging in not one main thing. People wanted a better social statuses, better social.
But I just raised this question. My personal friends last night, because it's the holiday eve, everybody is after work. Almost everybody came to. They're like, what's different in this protest is there's a few center of the protest, not only one. So everybody chose whoever it's comfortable for them, and everybody went out to support the protest. And I think if they still want a peaceful protest and they want to continue the demand and the pressure, maybe a general strike.
Something to that effect. Yeah, but do you get a sense that people are willing to stay in the streets for many, many days?
I doubt that.
No.
I personally think it's a very sensitive place, Hong Kong.
Yeah.
It's part of China. But still, it's the tension of the international community. So
thank you for being with us this morning. When we get back, Breast Cancer Month, Awareness Month is upon us, and we will mark it. First, though, the news. Welcome back. It is still Wednesday, October 1st, 2014. This is still the morning edition. I am still Yael V. Last I checked, and thank you for staying with us. Moving on to our next topic. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It's marked by countries across the world every year to increase awareness of the disease, early detection and treatment, which of course can save lives. All those big words and cliches are put aside the minute it happens to you and to your body. It changes everything you know, and the patient enters a world of fear, uncertainty, and also hope. As they begin a long process of healing, we are honored to be joined in studio by Orit Bertini-Shavit. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You're an artist who survived breast cancer. And actually, you know, one can say you survived breast cancer through the help of your art.
I can say so.
You can say so. Tell me your story. Tell me what, you know, from the moment that you were... First of all, I want to hear the personal details, because I think none of us realize how hard it is. When you were first diagnosed, how does one react to news like that?
I think when the doctor told me I have breast cancer, the earth shook.
Yeah.
I really felt all my world was not stable anymore. And for me, I think the second thought was this project of photographic project, which I think enabled me to take control of something.
That's what happens. You lose control
in my life.
Yeah. So tell me about the project. It was basically you started taking pictures of yourself.
It was myself and the things I observed around me, my world.
How does the world change? What do you mean, the things you observed around you?
I saw it completely different, everything. It was slow. It was as if I am outside and watching in slow motion everything, because it takes a long time, this, all these treatments.
Right.
So it takes almost 1 year. So I saw all the seasons changing like you never see it.
And we're looking at, if we can, you know, see the pictures on both screens here. And then we're looking at, you know, the pictures that you took. It's basically so this is the pictures of how you were changing your body. Wow.
This project I did after.
Okay.
Not while I was in the middle of treatments.
In the middle of treatments.
This was, I think, 2 years after.
And this
when I could be a little, you know, to take distance from all this.
And when you're talking about taking distance, because it's a project basically of your body and what happened to it through it. And what do you mean by taking distance? Because you were still
First of all, while I did this project, I took a distance and observed in the eye of the artist, which enabled me a peaceful place.
Right.
Not to be inside this all body suffering. So that was very good. It was really a place of beauty and quiet place, peaceful place. Right. And 2 years later, I could look at it otherwise and with humor. And to see the gift it was also.
When you started the project, when you started taking pictures of your body, and I'm asking this because I'm assuming, is it something that you did because you thought you were leaving this behind you, or this was something to deal with throughout it, or to take pictures? You know, what goes through one's mind? Because I'm only asking because if I were sick, the last thing I would want to do is take pictures of myself as a sick person. And what brings one to actually do that is what I'm wondering.
First of all, because I am an artist, so everything I'm looking on the world through the lens of the camera, and it's another me that is looking on the world. Yeah. So it was another me that looking on outside. Me from outside.
And when it comes to, you know, it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So first of all, how old were you, or, you know, when were you diagnosed? Was it early detection?
No,
was it?
No, I was not. I was 50 years old.
Yeah. But early detection when it comes to the disease, you are okay now, I'm assuming. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
first of all, thank God for that. Yeah, knock on glass, as we do here all the time. But you know, it's something I think important that we want to leave our viewers with. First of all, I think it's great that you had your art and you have your art.
Yes.
And this is actually an exhibition that's being shown now.
No,
No?
it was shown.
It was shown already.
Yes.
Okay. It's an exhibition that was shown. What were the reactions to the exhibition?
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Very good. No, that's great.
Very good.
And
but I want to say that I volunteer now in a non-profit organization that supports women with breast cancer called One of Nine.
Okay.
And
is it one of 9 people? One of nine women has.
I think that now is more.
Yeah, I think the numbers
the statistics
are higher.
But those women always ask me what helped me. And between other tips, body-mind tips that I give them, I tell them about this project of art. And I advise them to find their way of drawing away from the illness, from the suffering.
That comes out. I have to tell you, this is it's an incredibly powerful piece of visuals, you know, to look at, because I think, you know, none of us can really understand what goes through a person when they're facing that disease. Yeah. I'm very happy. I just want to say that I'm very, very, very happy that, you know, you are doing well, that you are healed, and that you have this power of art. But as we said, it is Cancer Awareness Month, and thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks.
Once again to something entirely and completely different. Tony, I always put you on the spot.
You do, but you know, actually, you know who's going to get me off the hook here is Madonna. Because of course, when you talk about breasts, let's just say that, you know, Madonna is never far from one's thoughts. And although she...
When I think of mine, yes, okay.
Yes, lovely in all regards. But also it's very lovely what Madonna has done, causing a bit of a buzz online.
Right.
Yes, it has nothing to do with her various situations, but she has opened a school in Karachi for girls.
Really?
Yeah, it's the...
How very Oprah-esque.
Yeah, exactly. She Instagrammed some pictures. The Dream Model Street School has so far admitted 1,200 kids. I actually think it's boys and girls, but I'm not sure if they're together. I know girls for sure. Anyway, this is part of an ongoing project that she has to, you know, after her involvement in Malawi and that.
No, I mean, it's lovely, it's phenomenal. But as I said, how very Oprah-esque.
Yeah.
It's almost like, listen, I'm all for these 2 women to go head-to-head in the competition on who opens more schools for girls in places where we need them.
But you know, education, you know, we got to say is so important in every part of the world. I mean, even in Florida, which is.
I think in Florida. Of all places, it's really crucial.
It is crucial.
It's crucial.
You know, because so far the results haven't showed us that much success. But
right.
I'm sure in Florida, as elsewhere in the world, there's a big hit in the making with Aretha Franklin, who has done a remake of Adele's "Rollin' in the Deep" on her new album.
Oh!
A little controversially.
Why? I can't wait to hear it. I'm sure it's fabulous.
There may be a little auto-tune, possibly. We're not sure, but sources are saying that maybe there was some a little bit of a manipulation there in the first verse. I don't know.
Really? Okay. Well, supposedly we're about to hear this.
Ah.
Wait.
And it's bringing me out of the dark.
Oh, she's fabulous.
She is. She's, you know, great diva classics.
I barely heard.
You know,
Go ahead.
when I first heard the song from Adele, I thought this Aretha Franklin should be doing a song like this.
I know, and you know what? I think that the controversy is actually that Adele. I love Adele. Everybody loves Adele. I know, but you can't beat that.
No, I mean I love Aretha more.
I know exactly.
Yeah.
I know.
Respect where respect is due from a long time back. So that's interesting on the audio front, but also in terms of respect. Fashion Week in Paris, we talked about Kanye West and this and that controversy, but has to be said that Jean-Paul Gaultier closed Paris Fashion Week with a bang. And why is this so? He's actually bid adieu to his ready-to-wear lines, which actually in the fashion industry is big news because Jean-Paul Gaultier has always been a force in French fashion, big economic impact here, and he has decided to do other things. He'll still do haute couture.
Thank God for that.
Yes, and which has a ripple effect into streetwear.
I will keep, diligently looking at his haute couture online.
Yeah,
right.
And now, speaking of which, the show that he had was apparently one that they're still talking about in Paris. He had a photo perhaps of like some 80-year-old models or 70 with some young guys like in their 20s kind of walking down the catwalk together. It was like a fake beauty pageant that he had staged. So it was very theatrical, very Gaultier. There's his sombrero look.
Ah, yeah. Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Sort of like playfully subversive.
I would go to work with that.
Listen, bring it on. There's the cougar with the cub there on the other side there.
The cougar with the cub. Yeah. That's a swimsuit attire, or is that a nightgown? Is that like a night and evening dress?
Yeah, I'm still only got to check my vision on that, but I see it looks like a beauty pageant kind of stripe there.
But there's like half of a skirt and then a bathing suit.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Once again, I would go out with that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just playful fun. Catherine Deneuve was there in the audience. So
nice save.
Boy George.
Playful, yeah. Catherine Deneuve was there. Boy George.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to Boy George?
He was at the Gaultier show in Paris.
God bless you. Yes.
Speaking of boys, Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
Now, Olympic swim champion Michael Phelps, of course, was arrested for driving under the influence, presumably of alcohol. I love how in America now you can just drop off. You're supposed to know what it means.
I know.
Under the influence of booze.
Booze, folks.
Now, the interesting thing here is they found that he was excessively speeding and crossing lanes. And I thought to myself, wait, isn't that like every driver in the Middle East?
Yeah. Crossing lanes, but also maybe he was trying to swim.
He
was looking for his lane.
He was wading across.
First of all, I gotta tell you, I did several pieces about Phelps. I read so much about him. This is a kid who, like, his entire childhood was spent in a pool. Let him have a drink now.
But let him have a drink, once he's, at the bar
fine,
or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he's had a very stressful childhood.
Yeah, but an inspirational swimmer. I mean,
incredibly so. I don't think we've seen an athlete like him.
I think he's won more Olympic medals than anyone else.
He's got like 16 million or something.
He should celebrate, for lifetime.
For that.
Go to the bar.
Drink at the bar.
Yeah. Anyway, so. Also speaking of boys, again, Ad Age talks about Viagra's new campaign. They are actually, they've launched this new advertising campaign using women to sell Viagra to men with the tagline.
I love this headline. To get a rise out?
To get a rise out of...
advertising age.
Oh, yeah, that's right. There's a missing word there. But basically, if ED, because that's not what they're calling the situation, is stopping what you started, ask your doctor about Viagra.
And it's a beautiful blonde.
With a British accent.
If you ask him, then maybe you can have me?
Yes,
okay, that's basically it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's causing a bit of a stir on Madison Avenue, this.
But the headline is a great approach to get rise out.
And it's Anyway, speaking of things getting heated, Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh.
Did you know that she's back on
The View?
Back on The View and causing a ruckus.
Shocking.
It's shocking, right? Yeah. I mean, it didn't take long, right? I mean,
isn't that why they brought her in? Okay, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess so. But apparently, Whoopi Goldberg and Rosie had a bit of a thing in between. Like it was a commercial break, but the whole studio audience got in on this sort of exchange. Apparently, during the segment, Rosie was maybe cut off early for a commercial break, and she didn't take too kindly to that. Even though she's an old television pro, she should know that interruptions happen. But again,
don't we ever?
Yeah. But so The View is looking to be, the thing to watch, I guess. Now that Rosie's
that's
back.
a nice resurrection, I have to say.
Yeah, where was she all this time?
Let's see.
A League of Their Own reruns.
Oh my God,
I never saw
that
movie, but it was supposed to be one of Madonna's best.
You never saw A League of Their Own? There's no crying in baseball?
No.
Yeah, that's a famous line.
Birthday gift.
Coming up. Yes. And
the caffeinated underwear scandal has come to a close.
I must have missed that one.
Yeah,
What was the scandal?
Well, apparently some people were buying this underwear thinking that it would squish the cellulite right out of them, thanks to the cellulite properties or whatever of caffeine, which caffeine I guess doesn't have. And the Federal Trade Commission in the U.S. basically fined these companies.
Caffeine-infused weight loss underwear.
Yeah, these companies have to give the money back now, apparently, to the consumers because the eye pants, $44 per pair, do not reduce cellulite through caffeine. Maybe you should just pour coffee all over your body and hope for the best.
Right now. Okay, Tony, that is it for us this morning. Clearly not enough caffeine in my cup for my thighs or my or the level of alertness, my lord. When we get back, a lot more about sports that I know nothing about. First, though, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Thank you for staying with us. I-24 News Morning Edition, the place to be, the last part of the Daily Show today. We're finally, once again, I'm joined by handsome, handsome men.
Thank you. Someone had to say thank you.
I'm still overwhelmed.
As you can see, I am sporting a cold and I'm heavily medicated. That said, Daniel, what do you have for me today? Economy Magazine, Daniel Roth, one of my favorite people in the whole world, excluding you.
We figure everyone knew that.
Completely. Yes, shoot.
Brazil's election is coming up in a couple of days.
What's ever left of Brazil after the World Cup? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's there was huge protests and billions, tens of billions spent, and tens of billions more being spent on the Olympics. You can speak to this, of course. And
World Cup is over. Olympics are coming up. You have to spend just as much.
Just as much.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they are coming up. But we do have a piece about this, right? Let's take a look at the report and then break it down.
As Brazil prepares for a general election on October 5th, economic issues are coming to the fore, according to a report from Reuters. The incumbent President Dilma Rousseff is facing an uphill battle defending slow growth over the last 4 years.
The economic situation may be one of the biggest factors that will decide the 2014 election, because Dilma Rousseff represents the third time under the Workers' Party with the same base in the government, and because she inherited a very positive economic situation. She's leaving the country worse off than when she came in, with lower growth, high inflation, and unbalanced public finances.
While investors are hoping for a power shift to the right, after years of Rousseff's state intervention in the economy, the major issues facing Brazilians are falling to the wayside on the campaign trail.
The clear omission in the three stump speeches in regards to the main areas of social issues, which are healthcare, education, employment, income, food security. You don't see a serious structural discussion about these issues that is able to confront inequality in Brazil in a coherent way.
Indeed, by all counts, business concerns rather than social concerns are front and center. And recession in the first half of 2014 and low job creation this summer have hurt Rousseff's campaign, but a jobless rate of just 5% in August is a number she can tout. Rousseff is battling it out with environmentalist Maria Silva and the right-wing candidate pulling up the rear, Aécio Neves. The race between Rousseff and Silva is close, with both polling at around 40%. With only 5% of voters undecided, the race will be down to the wire.
So Daniel Roth of the Economy Magazine, I-24 News, is always economy at the heart of these elections.
Always.
Yeah. How bad is it?
Well, the interesting thing here is that Rousseff is most likely going to win. Even though she inherited a 7.5% annual growth economy and it's been in recession for the first half of 2014, so it's really dropped on the investor side, on the growth side. As well, as we mentioned before the piece, there's been massive protests across the country, not only to do with the sporting events, but the rise in transportation while spending tens of billions, the rise in the cost of transportation, rather.
Interesting point, if I'm making a side note, I think that so much money is always invested in these sporting events. We were talking about the Olympics, the World Cup, because the hope is that it's going to pay itself back by all the people who are going to come. I'm simplifying this. Did that happen in the case of Brazil?
No, and it never does. Yeah. It's very rare, and people often question the numbers when someone reports back from a World Cup or Olympics.
Right.
People wonder, are these really the right numbers?
Exactly.
Most of the time, it costs the public money to host these events. It brings prestige, and it can bring notoriety in many respects. It can bring.
But what's good prestige at the end of it? It's supper time.
Right,
yeah.
And good city planning can take a soccer stadium or an Olympic village and turn it into something for the future, but it takes good city planning.
As was the first point of your sentence, good city planning, yeah.
Right, but so this election is really about economics. Rousseff, again, she's easily attacked on both ends because she took Lula's Brazil, a Brazil where tens of millions of people were lifted out of extreme poverty, and a Brazil where when he left office there was also growth, so investors were generally happy. People living in poverty were being lifted up into the middle class in one of the most unprecedented waves of upward mobility in the history of upward mobility. So she has been riding that wave to some extent, and she may ride that wave here as well. Maria Silva, who's the next closest, it comes from the same party, so a lot of the economic policies will be similar, but she has a focus on environmentalism. So that's her major difference, and she may pull it out. And an interesting note here is
environmentalism.
Maybe. Most analysts and most people on the street say, look, Rousseff's the one we know. We're going to stick with the one we know.
Okay. And so you say that she's poised to win this, and
that's what it seems.
And markets around the world. Anybody else, watching this? How important is Brazil to the world economy, if at all? I'm asking.
Brazil is the biggest economy in Latin America, and the United States and North America, we can say wholly, has a lot of interest in the agricultural space, primarily of South America.
Right.
It's one of the unfortunate top-down relationships in the world, where North America really uses South America as its basket of goods. But Brazil is on top. They're the biggest economy, the most successful economy in that basket of goods, at least from a North American perspective.
Right. Okay. I mean, there was a time there, I think, 5 years ago, what you described, that it was booming, though, no? That it was, I know this just because I have so many friends, going there with businesses from the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
And Brazil, like I said, Brazil is, out of all of the South American countries, it's the richest. It's doing the best. And the question is, who can continue that rise that Lula, who Obama once called the most popular politician in the history of politics.
We're in the history mode today, yes?
Yeah, no, maybe he said in the world at the time. I'm not sure you can say in the history of politics, but this really lifted Brazil up. And Brazil is so it's a major economy. It's an important economy.
Watch, definitely. Elections are when?
October 5th.
October 5th. Daniel Roth will be watching for all of you on The Economy magazine, which is on I-24 News. Plug it.
I-24 News at 7:10 p.m.
There you go. Stay where you are, because we're moving to the other. You, by the way, I got to tell you, Jonathan, that's Jonathan Regg of the Sports Magazine. You are looking smart.
I am smart.
It was black last time, and now you're sporting these
We're changing.
Changing seasons.
Because then people have to stay hooked all the time. What is he going to wear today?
That's it. That will be our new fashion magazine, Jonathan Regg.
Oh, yes.
What color will he come in?
What would some people think about the fact of me and fashion at the same time?
And fashion at the same time. What do you have for me today?
Champions League. First, we'll begin with the fact that Paris Saint-Germain beat Barcelona last night 3-2 in a very entertaining entertaining game. It's a big deal in France because PSG coach Laurent Blanc was the rumors he'll be sacked if the team loses.
Of course,
because they have not been doing so good this season in the Champions League and more so in the French league. Question is, should French teams bring foreign coaches in? Because if we look at what happens this season, Marseille, they started the season exceptionally well under Argentine coach Marcelo Bielsa. On the other hand, Monaco, with big expectations, are doing terribly with Portuguese coach Leonardo Jardim. Speak about all this in a second. First, let's see the story by Michael Friedman.
Yay!
Foreign coaches often hope to revolutionize Ligue 1 in France with the goal of triggering an impact in French football. However, their ambitions do not always work out. Marseille's coach, Marcelo Bielsa, has made a lot of noise in French football. He came to Marseille with new rules, and his players have had to adjust to his rougher methods.
In terms of training, it's different. It's an approach that comes from abroad. Marcelo Bielsa makes us do more technical exercises. We do not play much. He's hardworking and a real tactician.
It appears to work with their recent 2-1 victory against Saint-Etienne. Marseille has now won 6 consecutive league matches. André-Pierre Gignac even scored 8 goals in the last 8 matches. In Monaco, Portuguese coach Leonardo Jardim arrived with a good philosophy: possession, constant pressing, and attacking football. But the coach is still looking to find that right combination, as he already used 19 players, 3 gaming systems, and 7 different defenders. The departure of Falcao and James Rodriguez did not help the coach to balance his squad. His players are aware, but ready for the challenge.
Now it's something else. You have to adapt. It's like on the ground. You have to adapt to any situation. So now everyone should make an effort.
The Portuguese coach failed to regain the level of the team, which was led by Claudio Ranieri. Monaco continues to have ups and downs, and despite 2 victories against Montpellier and Guingamp, the team lost 1-0 to Nice.
This is the first time I saw a derby in which the stadium is not full. In Greece and Portugal, it's different, and it's something else. In Greece or Portugal, it's different, and I'm sad for the results.
He also believes many decisions made by the referees were unfair for his team. Foreign coaches often come to France with their own rules, but do not always stand the test of time. Ultimately, Ligue 1 is not open to changes that easily.
So, who was this guy?
So again, the question is, are the foreign coach successful? And judging by the examples we're seeing now in France, the answer is so-so.
You're being very polite. Yeah, so-so.
But on one side, this season is very interesting with the coaches in French league. Some of them, many new interesting names such as Claude Makelele, a very famous former French player, and others have taken teams, and it's interesting to see how they're doing. But yet the biggest name is Marcelo Bielsa, who came from outside, and he's doing great. And then there were rumors about Laurent Blanc. Will he be sacked? No, not now. Of course, after he beat Barcelona 3-2 the way they did last night, he's a hero once again. That's how it happens in football.
Until he loses.
Exactly, until he loses the next time. But so far he's doing good. So the flow of things with foreign coaches, we see at the same time one doing exceptionally well in Marseille, the other one doing exceptionally bad with Monaco. Not clear yet where this is going, and France is very interesting now because it's going to host the next Euro 2016. So people,
really,
yes, they are, and again, you can say, well, perhaps the most interesting French coach to see is Didier Deschamps, but he is in charge of the team, of the national team. He will not give up that position ahead of the home Euro. So a lot of things flowing within the French coaches, and it's quite interesting to see where this is going.
Interesting question raised by somebody who, as I always, I have to preface my words when I meet you, who knows nothing about this, but foreign coaches all around in Europe. I'm just thinking of the continent. Help me out here, Daniel. With all the power plays that have gone on in Europe, which are always, still within the societies, how do they fare?
Usually, when you bring a foreign coach, you expect to have something that you would not have with your local coach.
He has to win all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. If we look at the Spanish La Liga last season, the champions, Atletico Madrid, were led by Diego Simeone from Argentina. Runners-up, Barcelona, were headed by Gerardo Martino from Argentina. And Real Madrid, their coach was Carlo Ancelotti from Italy. Does that mean there are no good Spanish coaches? No, it doesn't mean that. But yet, the big teams, when they wanted to succeed, They brought in foreign managers. Now Barcelona brought in Luis Enrique, a Spanish manager, a former player, and they're doing exceptionally well in the league so far. So you can't exactly know that.
Yeah.
We look again. If we look at England, there's Jose Mourinho in Chelsea. There's Arsene Wenger in Arsenal.
Well, not much is helping England in any case.
Yeah.
Over the course of the last several years, when it comes
so
to
much.
not so much when it comes to football. What else, darling?
Champions League, we said we had one night of matches last night, with Paris Saint-Germain beating Barcelona. Another night of matches coming tonight. The biggest game, the most interesting game, will be Atletico Madrid against Juventus, Spanish champions against Italian champions. You know, you're right by doing because I'll tell you one thing. Maybe I shouldn't say this. The group stage. Put yourself in trouble, mister.
Go for it.
The group stage in the Champions League is boring. I don't mean that a match between Juventus and Atletico is boring. I mean that there are so many matches, so many teams. There are 8 matches per night. I don't know. I can't remember by heart all the results from last night. There are 8 of them. So you know the big results.
That's ridiculous.
It gets interesting in February when the smaller teams go away and it's a knockout stage. You know, you lose, you go.
Yeah.
Exactly, by now. So yes, Paris Saint-Germain against Barcelona last night, great game. Juventus against Atletico against Juventus, we should say tonight, will be a good game. But it's like you know, we're driving.
We're driving it, and we can hear all about this on a show called
The Sports Daily Magazine tonight, 7:40 Jerusalem time, 6:40 Central European time, football and much more.
And
Watch
much more,
us.
though you're talking football twice a week.
Monday, Tuesday, talking football when we summarize everything that happened in the European leagues, and tonight it's football and more.
And more, so it's football, and they're talking about it, Daniel.
They're talking.
They're talking. Okay, that's
It's
it.
not enough room to play.
We talk the talk.
Talk the talk, and we're going to walk the walk, because that's it for us, folks. It's been I-24 News Morning Edition. Check us out on the web, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. And, of course, do not forget to tune in tomorrow morning to start your day, as you should be doing every single day, with I-24 News Morning Edition.